the good news is hopefully this won't take the full 30 minutes. We'll get back on schedule. I've given this talk twice as an Ignite talk, and it's hard for me to imagine adding 25 minutes because it works really well in 5 minutes. But I do get to elaborate on some things that we gloss over. I am real quick, and I apologize if Jason or any of the organizers did this already, but I do want a quick show of hands. How many people is this your first DevOps Day? Nice. Yeah, this is a trend I'm seeing this year is like a lot of new faces. We had a very similar response in Baltimore. Any DevOps conference? Is this your first of any DevOps kind of conference? So that's less hands, right? Okay. Any developers? It's a nice mix. Operations? Wow, all right. You outnumber the developers, so you guys are going to want to keep it down. Management, leadership, whatever you call yourself. Oh, nice, nice. All right, we'll go easy on you too. All right. So this whole talk was sort of inspired by me attending DevOps Days. I actually, my very first DevOps Day was in Denver 3 years ago, which I believe was their first one. I was brand new to Sonatype. I got sent out to RSA, told to be here to show up for this. I was on the road immediately. But I felt that the culture piece was often missing. We talk about it, we hint at it, we kind of beat around the bush. And I'm going to try and really just harp on culture. So it's my hope for this talk that we'll come out of this with understanding that what we're talking about here is primarily people. We have to keep grounding ourselves in the concept of people. Hopefully we'll use that to ground the conversations for later today and tomorrow. And we'll talk a little bit about why the silver bullets of the past didn't work. Spoiler alert, it's the people again, but we'll get to that. So if it's not all too obvious, I've been in IT for a really long time. I started programming in middle school in the 1970s. I didn't start programming professionally until the early 1990s after a stint in the Navy. And so I feel like I have this longitudinal view of the growth and maturation of IT over that period of time. And, you know, and I was the junior, when I joined the development team, I was the junior developer. I kind of got put into the build process because that's where they put junior developers in the late 1990s. And I sort of carved out a career in what was then called SCM, Software Configuration Management. And it kind of evolved into build and release management. And it sort of culminated in doing a DevOps team at a Fortune 100 company. So I did spend the last 12 years of those like 18 years in that role at Fortune 100 companies. So I have seen this in the large and, you know, in sort of the worst case scenario. So throughout all that time, there's been a number of things that have come along that have promised to help us, you know, get so much better, right? It's usually in the form of tools, but there's also, you know, there's been methodologies, there's been architectures. I've seen the rise of the web, 3-tier architectures, SOA, ERP systems, you know, just all sorts of stuff that have come along, and each one promising, you know, yet again, how it's going to really revolutionize how we do work and bring all this new productivity to everyone. In fact, you know, and I was guilty of this myself, we would always rationalize these new efforts in the exact same way to our business partners. I myself wrote a blog years ago talking about how the golden rule was broken in IT and that we could, in fact, go faster, be better, and cheaper, right? And that's, in the world of hardware, that's the thing. You only get to pick two. But in our world, it seems like we get to pick all three. But what it occurred to me that I'd been making this same rationalization over and over and over, right? Each year with the new thing, this was sort of my template of how to sell this, how to get funding, how to make it happen. And then it was a bit of a shock when at DevOps Enterprise Summit in 2014, Nicole Forsgren gets up and tells us that business has long known that there's a thing called the productivity paradox and that IT investments don't yield any real return on investment. So they were just like placating us, right? They were just like, yeah, Kurt, sure, we'll buy you a new shiny tool. You'll get to go do your work. We want to keep you happy. We don't really expect it to do what you tell us, right? So that was always the thing, is like IT investment has been proven time and time again, empirically, to not really produce the benefit that anyone thinks. In the mechanical world, it can produce 3 to 4% ROI. In IT, it's been sub 1% historically and empirically. And so this is the Deming quote, obviously. about optimizing the whole and how that sort of results in sub-optimizing the parts. But what I had been doing, what many of us have been doing, was buying those tools, bringing those methodologies, and really working in our little domain. Maybe it was dev, maybe it was ops, maybe it was security, maybe it was QA. But we were all optimizing our little world. And then I remember the early 2000s, we saw the rise of Six Sigma, for anyone that remembers that. And we would send these black belts into your work, into your space, and they would map out all your processes, and they would streamline the process, and they would make your little your little subsystem of that company more efficient. Again, optimizing the subsystem, not the whole. That black belt team never really looked at the whole company and tried to understand what's the end-to-end value proposition to our customers. Instead, they would go into one little business unit and help them with whatever they were doing. And also along the way, as these silver bullets are coming out, this was the template. If we're going to evaluate bringing this stuff into our company, we have to understand how it impacts our people, how it impacts our processes, and what tools, if any, are going to be needed, right? What technology. And so this was the go-to. The thing is, the way we thought about this was we really focused on the process and the technology. And when it came to people, we didn't really trust people to do anything they couldn't already do, right? If it wasn't listed on their resume, if it wasn't some skill that they already possessed, we sort of intrinsically assumed that they couldn't do other things. And so the people part was always really about, well, we're going to have to bring in consultants and train them, or we're going to have to send them out to train them, or they're going to have to get certified, right? And it was just inherent that we didn't trust them because we viewed them like cogs in a machine, right? This is Taylorism. This is the prevailing thought from the Industrial Revolution that pervaded all the way up through the 20th century, and for a lot of companies probably still exists today, right? We view work as something that we can deconstruct. We can break down all the steps, all the processes, all the things you need to do, and then we tell some generally underskilled individual how to do those things so that the machine works, right? And that's sort of the world that I lived in, the world many of us are probably still in, and the world we're trying to get rid of. So what I'm getting at is all of these things that came along tended to be very prescriptive, right? It was, this is how you do SAFe. I like to pick on SAFe. Sorry if there's any big SAFe fans out there. And it's just different because it leads to this world of you're not doing agile right? That's a really common statement. So it's just this weird dichotomy of how we brought these things in, how we viewed people in that setting, and really what was going on at that time was, from a culture standpoint, from a people standpoint, was what I call the hero culture, right? It was really, we had just a few people on each team that we leaned on every day that really carried the weight. They were our mythical 10x developers, right? And they were also the ones that showed up to put out the fire that they helped build, right? But they were the heroes, boy. They were our best and brightest. But that was the sort of the prevailing culture. We didn't value the whole team. We valued a couple of senior people on the team, and everyone else was just sort of, some man hours we could throw at some things. Now, it's not a DevOps talk if you don't tell people to go read a book. This is still my favorite book for a number of reasons. The word DevOps is not in here at all. It's really lessons learned in the manufacturing world and other things about how to create a lean, agile organization that can respond to change. That is really our goal here. And it's just, if nothing else, you don't have to read the whole book. Just read the introduction, right? Because in the introduction, they talk about when GM decided they wanted to get some religion. They wanted to learn, the Japanese were kicking our butts in the automaking industry. They captured like 25% of our market share over about a 10-year period because of the Toyota production system. And so GM decided, wow, we got to learn that. And so they went to Toyota and they said, hey, we want to work with you. We're going to spin up a plant, and we want you to show us how to do that Toyota thing, right? And Toyota said, okay, but we have one condition. You have to give us all the same people that worked at your plant. It is our goal to prove to you that it is not the process, it's not the tooling, but it was how you treated your people. And so NUMMI was born. So, and this was sort of brought back to life. It was a mothballed plant in Fremont, California. That was the worst performing plant of any GM plant, lowest production volumes, lowest quality. Notoriously unruly workforce. A lot of people might think, blame the unions. But really, these people just didn't like their job. They weren't happy going there, and it showed. So, so NUMMI was interesting. But what Toyota knew was, if we create a high-trust culture and we give people the intrinsic motivators, which is to say, give you a chance to be proud of your work, right? To do work that you enjoy because you feel like you're making a difference, right? And so Toyota knew that if they focused on that, if they could bring in those same people and try and beat GM over the head with the idea that it's not our robot arms, right? It's not how we laid out the assembly floor. It's how we treated the people in this setting that made the difference. This is what's key to building a large organization that can adapt to change, right? It's about the people. And so it turns out that, and let me see where I'm at. So it turns out that this plant goes on to be the highest performing plant in GM, right? It becomes the #1 plant, highest production volume, highest rate of quality. And it's great. And GM's thinking like, wow, this is fantastic. Wow, we've unraveled the mystery. Now, it's probably worth pointing out, though, that GM never recreated that success. They tried to take this program to the rest of their plants. They did it without Toyota's help. They did not treat the people the same way. They got really focused on the way the floor was laid out and the processes and the robot arms. And they got really focused on that. And they said, if we just do those things, good things will happen. And good things didn't happen. They didn't magically happen, right? It doesn't matter if you had the best robot arm and the most efficient layout of your floor that minimized waste and motion. So at the end of the day, it turns out carrots and sticks aren't the best motivator. They only work in purely mechanical situations. This has been proven empirically time and time again. If you have to do a manual repetitive task, and I offer you a $100 bonus, if you can do 10% more, you will probably do 10% more. It's not really sustainable. It's not really scalable, but I can get a benefit. It turns out if the work that you're doing requires creativity, this does not work at all. In fact, it has a negative impact, right? It actually, when you start to create financial incentives around delivering this work, people start to become less creative and deliver work. They just deliver something, right? It doesn't matter what it is. They deliver it because they're going to get extra money for delivering it. So it actually has a negative effect. And so the last part I want to talk about from NUMMI was these workers, right? The workers that were the worst of the worst, and they came in and they created the highest performing GM plant. When interviewed, they talked about how it changed their lives on a personal level, on a family level, on a day-to-day level, because they were no longer bored and depressed. They felt connected to what GM was doing. They felt connected to the cars rolling off their line. They felt connected to the customers driving those cars. And they were really proud of that. And so it was really, really interesting to see that this spilled over into their everyday life because it really changed how we felt about ourselves, and it changed our desire to work, which then brought out the best in us, right? So we're going to just drive this home now. So DevOps is about aligning everyone to a shared goal, right? You're going to hear that time and time again. It's really about delivering customer value faster without compromising quality. Now, for a lot of folks, quality may be at such a level that compromising it is not the goal, but raising it is you probably have more upside there than not. But either way, the point is we're going to go faster. We're not going to make it worse, and we're going to save money. We're going to break the golden rule, and we're going to figure that out by leaning on our people, right? We're going to figure that out by working with them, giving them the tools necessary to conduct experiments, which is a form of trial and error, to get the data, to decide what it is we need to do, what's going to work, what's not going to work. Was what Pete alluded to. We're going to make it just a little bit better, right? So we're going to get the data. We're going to get that feedback. We're going to look at the process. We're going to try some things, some A/B type testing. My theory is I'm going to try it this way, and I think it's going to make it better. Your theory is you're going to try it that way. Let's go both test our theories. Let's bring the data back to the team and decide which way is the way forward. So it's much more about just giving the folks that you have the tools they need to learn. That's the baseline. That's the starting point. What they're going to come back with over time are your best practices, right? And just to connect this back, the very idea of best practices comes from Taylor in 1910, right? Because they were completely templatizing the process, and that was the best practice. Thou shalt always do it this way. This is the best way. What we're doing here, though, is we're saying, look, our situation is different. We're not like everybody else. Our product's a little unique. Our process is a little unique. Our people are a little unique. So we're going to let you go figure out what it is that works best for us. And that's probably not going to look like what you hear at conferences. It may or may not be what you hear from other people at this conference and what they're doing at their shop. That may or may not work for you because you're in a different context, right? And whatever that is, it affects it. So you have to, instead of coming to the conference and going back and saying, aha, I know it. If we just do CI/CD and Kubernetes, we're going to win, right? That's not how it's going to work, right? You have to come back and be like, wow, we've got to really start to get the team talking, really let them experiment, really let them learn, and they're going to tell us how to evolve our process, what tools we need. And if the tools don't exist, we'll build the tools, right? That's the cool companies. The cool companies aren't using the off-the-shelf tools. They're building the tools and open sourcing them that then we're bringing into our context, right? Because at the end of the day, you're just solving a problem, and you've got a lot of really smart, creative people. And if you give them enough runway, they can do it. So what you get is happy, motivated people. You get people that want to come to work. They're coming to work early. They're excited. They want to get a jump on the day, right? They cannot wait to get there. You also get to put really cheesy pictures in your presentations. Yeah, I love this picture. But it's true. I've seen this firsthand on a small team where we really did this sort of servant leadership thing, this sort, really empower the team, let them go. And it's infectious, right? It really changes how people feel about their job. They don't feel like, I'm just going to show up, I'm going to stamp my little paper, and I'm going to move it to another thing, and I'm going to just sort of do that over and over, and that's my job for the day. It really gives them the opportunity to express themselves, to feel like they're heard, to see their stuff get implemented, to see their stuff get to production. So I'm going to say this a couple more times maybe. DevOps is culture, right? If you leave these 2 days with nothing else, it's that DevOps is about the culture. The culture is so key to making this work. We've already heard, GM could not reproduce their gains without the culture piece. They had the best tooling, the best layout, the best processes, and they couldn't do it. So I'm going to tell you, don't get distracted by the tools and processes. They're very important. But don't get distracted. Always think about how it affects the people. What do the people feel about it? Have we done the experimentation? Have we given them time to give us feedback about what we think of this new tool, this new thing, whatever that is? And so what I'm going to posit is that what makes DevOps different than everything else that came before it is the way we look at people. It's the undoing of Taylorism. It's valuing our folks, all of them, not just the 2 or 3 fire setters and putter-outers, right? We really value that whole team. And you're going to create a culture that allows you to grow the people that will grow your business. Thank you very much.
Hey Curtis, so I have a question. So large organizations, some of the conversations we've had is when you talk about building a team, right, you build people and the people build the business. Some of the pushback that I'm getting a little bit of and that we're fighting is that when we invest in people, IT industry is so hot right now that people skill up and then they go out. How do you reconcile that? And just the stories, not that you need to convince me, but I need stories to tell the people that I got to answer to, right?
I mean, this is the fear. This is the thing we have to let go of. This is what's been so ingrained into us for so long, especially leadership who's, my age or above, right? Because that's what they know, right? This was business school. And so it's really hard to let go. But there's a quip, what happens if we train our people and they leave? And the alternative is, what happens if we don't train our people and they stay? Right? So that's my answer to that is, if you create a place where they want to work, they won't leave. People leave because they don't want to be there. So you have to create an environment where they want to be. I'll leave it at that. Any other CUBE questions? No? Awesome. Thank you, everyone.